So my educational experiences really are unique. Even though I grew up in a small town, my school was predominantly black. I was typically in classes with the majority of white people. I was typically in like talented classes or elevated academic classes and things like that. So I never really had the experience of just having people that looked like me in any of my classes from a young age. I went to school with some of my cousins who were also my age, and I never really got to see them during the school day except maybe at recess or at lunch or something like that. And for me, it was isolating. I was isolated at a very young age because of my abilities. I'm not saying it's a negative thing, but the sensation and the idea of the only is real. In some of my classes, there were a few other black females. It was very rare that there were other black males. At some point, I decided in undergrad, like I was gonna cut all my hair off, right? So you go from like this young lady who has a natural wrap, right? I'm getting perms, I'm going to a beauty shop. My hair is shoulder length and it's straight. And I rejected it at some point and just cut all of it off and I went natural. So having locks, I think I had locks that might have been about maybe this short when I started going on med school interviews. And my mom looked at me and she said, "Hey, you want to wear one of my wigs in there?" And I was appalled. I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, I just worry about, how you might be perceived, if you go to the interview with your natural hair." I didn't even hesitate. I said, "No. If they can't accept me for who I am, I'm not going to feel comfortable learning here anyway." And that was that. I never wore a wig. But that was the pressure. That was the one time when I felt like, okay, well, maybe I need to kind of switch it up a little bit.
There's some things that white men don't even have to think about that I have to think about, you know. As a black woman, I know this sounds probably superficial, but as a black woman, something as simple as our hair, prevents us from doing certain things. I can't go out and exercise like I want to because I'll sweat my hair out and I won't be able to make it look like I want it to look. So, things that people don't have to, a white man or a man in general, he goes, he takes a shower and he's ready. Women, as women, we have so much that we have to do in order to play the part because not only do we have to be educated and we have to be able to articulate our positions, but we have to come to the table looking a certain way. If I come to a meeting in jeans and a t-shirt, whether it's a $500 t-shirt and a $500 pair of jeans, I might be asked to go make a copy, whereas if I come to a meeting and I look like I'm professional, I may not be asked to make the copy as fast. But there have been many people and many instances where the person who was the most educated in the room, who, if she was a black woman, she was looked at as the assistant. And that's something that I have to always be aware of. I have to make sure that when I come in, that I have the posture of an executive and not somebody who's an assistant.
And so one of the things that I realized was that people were not as accepting of me being a black woman in leadership positions. So even though I had the education, even though I had the experience, even though, on a PT test in the military, I scored as high as anyone else, it still was different because not only are you a woman, but you are a black woman. And people will never understand the double outcast experience of being a black woman. I experienced it when I was in the military, I experienced it when I was in corporate America, and I now even experience it as an entrepreneur. So yes, it's difficult because people they don't expect that from you, right? Especially when you're pretty. They just expect pretty. They expect that you got there because of somebody, not because of your own will, your own intellect, your own knowledge and experience. So I've had plenty of times, especially in the military, where people would actually plot and plan against me to try to ensure that I failed just because I was a woman and just because I was black. It's been that way in the military. It's been that way in corporate America. It's been that way even in the church. Even in the church. You know, you want to talk about the Me Too movement? The Me Too movement is the most powerful inside of the church. For years, women have been running churches. For years, women have been the financial backbone of the church. But there are a few select men that are running it. So, but when a woman begins to take a leadership role, she's not accepted.
Just over the jobs that I've worked, companies that I've worked for, I've noticed that people in the same position as me, I noticed that because I was black, it almost like I had to prove myself more. Or it was almost like I couldn't just say something was right. I had to prove it, prove that that particular question or answer was completely right, versus other people, if they just say, oh, well, this is the answer, you automatically assume it's right.
Value. Mm-hmm.
But I almost had to say, oh, it was in page 77 of this handbook. But it is tough. You definitely have to prove yourself more. You have to work harder. And sometimes even that step up is not even promised. And you can, be just the perfect candidate for something. And sometimes you will still have someone with not as much experience as you have come in and take a higher position or get paid more than you do.
You know, I've been a project manager for telecom for many years, and finding that because I'm a woman, because I'm a black woman, I'm not given the same opportunities that a white male would get. Or I'm being talked to in a way that's demoralizing for me from a white female manager. I was in a position where I was already doing the work. Several black people applied for the permanent position. We knew when we didn't get it, someone outside the company that did not look like us was going to get the position. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And I think we were all too afraid to say something, but we knew what was happening. We knew what was happening. And when it came time to really look at employee versus contractor, all the contractors was black except for one. When it came time for COVID and they needed to cut the budget, all the black contractors were let go except for the one white. So those kind of disparities are something I will never forget. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I think in the corporate world, there's definitely, commingling of energies that you just have to kind of turn on and switch, depending upon the situation. And it's funny because a little over, about a decade ago, I've worked in a variety of different industries, from retail to hospitality, healthcare, IT, and now construction. But back when I was working in the hotels, I did a lot of work as either concierge or the guest services agent. So with that, I'm doing a lot of face-to-face, phone communication, whatever. And I had a colleague that tells me, I would talk, very casually with my coworkers. And then obviously when I'm picking up the phone and I'm addressing, an executive or a customer, a paying customer, obviously, I clear my voice and I'm a bit more elaborate or articulate. And my coworker told me, oh, every time you pick up the phone, you talk white. And I'm like, what is talking white? I never knew that being articulate was limited or exclusive to one race or one nationality or whatever. And I thought that was probably one of the most ignorant things that you can say. But there is that stigma that Black people are illiterate, that we don't speak well, that we, you know, slang and we don't have proper education. So the pressure is there to get into the workforce and, you know, make yourself a force to be reckoned with. Sometimes you got to do double the work, you know, to get half the credit, you know, and especially in the workplace, you have to get out there and present yourself a certain way. Whether you act like that all the time outside of work or at work, I mean, obviously you should be professional at work, you know? I mean, there's a certain level of decorum that you need to carry in the workplace, especially as a Black woman. We are the most underpaid, undervalued in the workforce. So yes, we have to bust our asses in the workplace to make ourselves seen and heard. And honestly, it's something that I'm willing to do. I'm going to continue to do. I'm going to make my, you know, name well known. I want to leave every company with a lasting impression, like, that sister was on it. I don't care what it was I was doing. You know, I want to be somebody like, you know, wow, we took a tough loss losing this person. She wasn't just an extra helper or an extra worker to keep the ship sailing. She was, you know, making all of these major moves, and you have to carry yourself in a certain way to, you know, to get that respect that you deserve.
When you just embody who you are, that's what draws people. That's what attracts people. That's what influences people. I never forget when I got out of the military, because again, I was ashamed of being this dark-skinned girl from Memphis with this accent. So when I would go to work, I would put on the, you know, the corporate accent. And I never forget, I had to go on this 7-city tour, had to go to California, New York, Denver, had to go to 7 different places. And they were used to hearing me on our conference calls, but they never saw me. So when they saw me, and they saw me face to face and they heard the Memphis accent, the first thing they said was, "I love your accent." And after the third person said, "No, you go to New York, you know, everybody hears about New York, and, you know, you go to New York and you command the room, and they say, "I love your accent." You go to California, you go to LA, you command the room, and they say, "I love your accent." And then, you know, you go to Denver, right at where I didn't even know there were Black people, and they say, "I love your accent." I said, you know what? I'm tired of being that person. I want to be me. And so I'm going to be the best me that I can be. I don't want to be anybody else. And from then on, I knew the power of just being your authentic self. It was so funny in corporate America. Every time I would do things that would set records, it would be like it was a surprise to everybody but me. They would be so surprised and so excited. And I'm like, well, that's what I was supposed to do. Because as this young Black girl, I always knew what? That I had to run faster. I had to work harder. I had to do more. So this is just the norm that I've created for my life.